guys, welcome back to another video. Today's video is a part 2 to vampire pet peeves. Last month I did a video where I talked about my vampire pet peeves, so today I'm going to be talking about some more because the list is ever growing. Let's get into it. Spilling blood. What I mean by this is when vampires blatantly waste their food. When they bite a person and they're spilling blood everywhere. Now, sometimes it's for comedic effect, like in What We Do in the Shadows, where he bites his victim and it sprays like a squirt gun. Okay, that is fine. But what I'm talking about is when a vampire is like starving and they attack a person and then they're literally, it's just spilling out of their mouth. Now, I know if you get real excited about something and you're ravenous and you're just gonna want to dig in, that can happen. But when it's clearly obvious that they don't need to be doing that they could just be drinking it, it's kind of just like a, why? It's a very minor thing that really is not a big deal, and most movies, you know, even if it's in there, it's like, who cares? But sometimes it's just very obvious that they're wasting it. Making it obvious that you're feeding. Now, what I mean by this is, in a lot of movies, instead of just biting the person, they will draw their head back, the fangs, it's a whole show. Fangs will extend and they'll launch forward. Sometimes this is, you know, works really well with the story, very cinematic, draws out the scene, adds suspense, whatever. But sometimes it just takes a little too long. Like, if they're trying to be sneaky, it's like, no one walking by would think, that's not a vampire. A big example of this is Nicholas Knight from Forever Knight. Like, every single scene where he bites someone in that show, it is that. His eyes light up, you know, he draws his head back, he goes, he hisses. But I think a vampire bite can be done well. Obviously, you want to build suspense and make it dramatic depending on the scene and what it's going for. But sometimes when they draw it out, it just gets overdone and silly. So I think there's a happy middle people just need to work to find. The next two are kind of connected to one another. The first one is when a human is turned really quickly. Now, as I've stated in the past, when it comes to becoming a vampire, I think there should be a process. It shouldn't be a bite and suddenly you're a vampire. I think there should be at least some blood exchange or whatever. I just feel like there has to be a process, otherwise everyone's going to be a vampire. This specific pet peeve is when they turn in like 5 seconds, 2 minutes. Like their body completely changes into a vampire's body that quickly. And I just feel like that if, let's say, a human did get bit by a vampire and was becoming one, it would take longer than 5 seconds. Their entire body is changing, it's healing, it's morphing, it's, you know, the insides are getting used to, you know, having to get used to drinking blood, not food. You know, your eyesight gets better, you're stronger, whatever. You know, so your body is changing in many ways, and the fact that it could happen like this makes no sense at all. But I just feel like them closing their eyes, opening them, and suddenly they're a vampire, it feels like it's a little too quick. I think there needs to be a process to become a vampire, and then when you're turning into a vampire, there should also be a process until you're fully transitioned. It shouldn't just be an instant, I'm a vampire now. Though that would be nice. You know, it doesn't have to be painful, but most times it is. It would just be nice if there was something more to it. To go off of this, I also have an issue when a human is being bitten by a vampire and they pass out really quickly. Like, they get bit and suddenly... Now, I get that, you know, if someone is bitten by a vampire, depending on the universe, sometimes it hurts, sometimes it doesn't. Maybe the shock of it causes you to pass out. I get it. It's kind of like, you know, if you're really terrified of needles and you see a needle, it pokes you, you're gone. I understand, but it's like sometimes it's just like they just instantly pass out or they instantly die. That one bothers me more than the instantly passing out. It's when like the vampire bites a human for about 5 milliseconds and they're dead. No. A human has quite a bit of blood in their body. The vampire would have to drain quite a bit of that blood to kill them. I don't think insta-death is possible. Now, obviously, if they hit an artery, like a really important one, then yes. Yes, they could have died that quickly. You know, they nick an artery and then suddenly they're bleeding out everywhere. That is possible. But if they're claiming that they bit a human and they're not bleeding out, you can clearly see they're not bleeding out, but they're dead. No. Unless you swallow all that blood in 5 seconds, which would be crazy. Passing out quickly, I mean, I understand some certain circumstances you can explain it away, but if they insta-die, that makes completely no sense. Another one is taking their shirt off. Not every movie and show does this, but there are times when a human, usually a human that's like, you know, being like, bite me, please, let me save you, one of those moments, where they take their entire shirt off. Usually guys, they're not wearing turtlenecks, not wearing anything they could just do that. So the fact that they have to take their entire shirt off to be fed upon makes no sense at all. It's just to show off their body most times. And it has nothing to do with the story or is completely unneeded. And, you know, you could be like, oh, they don't want to get blood on their shirt. And it's like, unless this vampire is wasting blood, as I said earlier, they're not going to get it all over your shirt. And I feel like you could stain your shirt a little bit if you're saving your loved one or whatever moment this is happening in. But they will, like, take their shirt off and be like, bite me. It's like, what? Why are you doing that? It's one of those things that just, it doesn't matter, but it bothers me. It bothers me because there's no need to take your shirt off. Just put your shirt back on. Unless you're wearing a turtleneck or an iron brace around your neck, keep your shirt on. Next up is a specific folklore trait that many vampires have. It's really heightened OCD. The Count from Sesame Street is a good example of this. In folklore, not all folklore, but in some vampire folklore, vampires had like an obsessive need to count or untie knots. So people would put netting over their windows and doors, so vampires couldn't come in until they untied all of the knots. Or they would spill rice, or anything that vampires would have to go down and count. And I think that's just a little silly. Now, obviously, if you're going for very folklore-based vampires, then you gotta have stuff like they can't cross running water, and holy water burns them, and they count. But to me, it's a little silly. I'm not gonna turn a movie off because it has it. I just think it's one of those weaknesses that are unnecessary. You know, there are a few weaknesses where I'm like, okay, that's pretty cool, like burning in the sun, which I know is not a folklore trait that wasn't really introduced till Nosferatu, unfortunately, but that's a cool weakness. I'm even a fan of, like, you know, not being able to see the reflection and sometimes being allergic to silver, even though that's mostly werewolves. That one's okay. You know, stake to the heart, obviously, decapitation, fire, whatever. OCD is just a very specific example, but sometimes vampire movies like to have it where the vampires have, like, really weird weaknesses, like very specific, very silly weaknesses, which can make a movie entertaining, and it's not terrible, but sometimes it's, like, unnecessarily silly. Growing limbs. The Blade movies did this, where if a vampire were to lose its arm, it would grow back, kind of like Deadpool, where he just has like a little baby hand and it slowly grows back into a human limb. I know vampires have very good healing capabilities. Depending on the universe, it's real quick. It involves some things, regardless of, you know, how they heal quickly. That's like the thing. But I think growing back limbs is a little much. And I don't think they should be, like, salamander people. But hey, to each their own. You know, maybe some movies do it well. I've just never seen a movie where I was like, that's sick. I'm always like, okay, really? This is a specific example from Twilight, where vampires are more powerful when they're first turned than the rest of their entire lives. So their first few weeks of being a vampire, they're, like, supercharged. And then as they grow older, you know, they're still very strong, very fast, heightened senses, you name it, but they're not as strong as they were when they were first turned. And I think that's just dumb. I think it should be when you are turned, you are the weakest you will be, and you get stronger with age, which a lot of movies do. You know, your psychic powers, if they have them, are stronger. Maybe you're stronger strength-wise, or your senses reach farther, or, you know, you can hypnotize better, or whatever. I just believe that it shouldn't start out where, like, you're a god and now you're just a peasant. Now, obviously, it's not that dramatic of a difference, but I do think that it should just be a progression, like getting stronger this way, not like you're stronger here and now you're declining. Most movies don't do this. This is a specific example from Twilight that I just think, I don't know, not a fan. When they're overpowered. Now, don't get me wrong, vampires have a lot of strengths. They're strong, they have heightened senses, they're super fast, agile, you know, like some of them can hypnotize, some of them have other powers, like in Twilight, they, you know, have elemental powers and can see the future and, you know, whatever. But what I don't like is when they make vampires gods, like these all-powerful beings, they barely have any weaknesses, and they have all these strengths behind them. They basically are Superman. And it's like, Superman is cool, but vampires are not Superman. They are not. I do enjoy when vampires, you know, maybe have special abilities sometimes, but I think when they're overpowered, it's like you gotta have weaknesses. You know, like there are movies where the vampire has like no weaknesses at all. Like they're basically invincible. And I think that every creature, no matter what they are, should have weaknesses. Nothing should be, you know, indefinite. Nothing should be immortal. Even though vampires can live forever, you know, they still have something that can take them out. And I think that that's an important aspect. And if you make a vampire, you know, god level, I just feel like it's a little too much. I don't mind when vampires have extra powers, like they can shoot fire out of their hands or whatever. You know, I do think that that's more wizard-like. I think vampires and wizards should be separate, but there are known stories where vampires can do magic and stuff like that, which is fine. As long as they have weaknesses, I'm okay with, you know, the occasional overpowered vamp. Just don't make them so invincible that there's nothing that can hurt them. And finally, my biggest pet peeve of this list is vampire children. I hate vampire children. Vampires have been known for quite a long time to be sensual creatures. You know, they feed on the living, they possess your soul, they lure you into the darkness, you know, and not every vampire is sensual. There are zombie-like vampires, there are really terrifying ghost-like vampires, but there are vampires who are known to be sensual, and I believe vampires are very sensual creatures because they are feeding off another person, and it's very close and intimate, and when you apply that to a child, it just gets very And most vampire children are annoying, or, you know, go on rampages, or can't control themselves, basically the same thing. But they have issues, many issues. And obviously if you're doing it where like a vampire grows up into an adult, that's fine. Like, I love young Dracula because you watch Vlad grow older. But when a kid is stuck at like 10 as a vampire, not saying every vampire out there is sensual. There are a lot of horror movie vampires where they're scary little demon children, which is fine. But if you have a universe where the vampires are that way and you turn a kid, then it's just, I don't know, not a fan. Not a fan. Comment down below if you have any pet peeves. Obviously, this is the second video I've made of pet peeves. Maybe I'll make a third one. I don't know. I didn't think I would have a second video, and then I was like, what are some other like things that bother me about vampire media? And then I was able to put another list together. So, there's that. Maybe I'll do a part 3. I don't know. Seems I'm into part 3s lately. If I can think of 10 more, I'll make another one. I am a giant fan of vampire media, but I've seen so much of it that I notice things. Now, obviously, there are things that bother me that really aren't a big deal. A lot of these pet peeves are that. They're very minuscule details that really have no effect on the main story. Like, if they're in there, it doesn't change it. It doesn't change anything if they're not in there. So it's fine. They're just little things that I noticed and I'm like, ugh. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll be back again next week with another one. Alright guys, see you later.